Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the House of Europe. This is the Commission and the European Parliament's joint premises here in Stockholm. We are very glad to see you here. Maybe we are lucky with the weather, bringing more people to an inside event. My name is Johan Wult. I work for the European Commission representation here in Stockholm, and we are very glad to organize and to host this seminar today. It's only 2 weeks left until the European elections, and it's also getting closer to the end of a very intense and varied program we've had in the House of Europe over the last couple of months. But the European elections is only one of many elections we will have this year. People say it's a super election year, and approximately 1/4 of the world's population is heading to the polls this year. It's not only a super election year, it's also a year when we see increasing geopolitical tensions, not least in the immediate neighborhood of the EU. We see foreign powers trying to influence the European public for their own purposes. And on top of that, we also witness a rapid and accelerating deployment of AI technologies. It's a technology that has great potential, but it's also very useful for anyone with malicious intentions, who wants to spread misinformation or disinformation. I think we all are now aware that AI can be used for producing synthetic content, for example, deepfake videos, voice cloning, or counterfeit websites. In short, the stars are aligned for disinformation actors who wants to influence our democratic society. And many people have warned about these effects over the last month. In a way, for me, it started with the World Economic Forum and their Global Risk Report for 2024 that was presented back in January this year, where they warned that manipulated and falsified information is the most severe short-term risk the world faces. And they also say that over the next 2 years, misinformation and disinformation will present one of the biggest ever challenges to the democratic process. And following from this report, we've also heard similar warnings from political leaders in Europe, among them our own European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, the French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken about these kind of things as well. And earlier this week there was a meeting in the General Affairs Council, so the 27 member states met, and they again reminded us or reiterated the warning that foreign state and non-state actors could use artificial intelligence to increase the effectiveness of hybrid campaigns or try to interfere with democratic processes. I think for more and more people, these threats are no longer abstract or distant. We've seen examples of disinformation campaigns in several EU member states and also in our own member state, Sweden. There was a poll made by the Eurobarometer where they asked Europeans if they consider foreign interference in our democratic systems a serious problem, and 81% said that they see this as a severe risk. I think as a consequence of that, many of us wonders, how are these things produced? How are they disseminated? And maybe more importantly, what can we do to counter? Is there a vaccine available to make us immune to this kind of spread of viruses? I hope that today's seminar will give us a reply to these questions. And with that, it's about time to give the word to our moderator. It's a person knowledgeable in matters related to security policy, and a person who for a very long time has been very vocal in his warnings about the risks of hybrid attacks and disinformation campaigns. I would like to give him the honor to present a panel we have of distinguished and experienced speakers. But first, a very warm welcome to the journalist, writer, resident senior fellow at Fri Värld, and today's moderator, Patrik Oksanen. A warm applause for you.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you very much, and I'm so glad to see that you all are here for this great and important conversation. We have a great panel as well, and I'm now first turning over to Brussels and the screen, and I hope that Eileen Coughlin, who is expert at the European Commission Directorate General for Communication, is there. Hello and good morning, Eileen.
Good morning, Patrick.
How are things in Brussels this morning?
Not too bad, a bit grey, but seemingly better than Stockholm.
Yeah, we'll jump into the conversation very soon, but then I would like to welcome the guests that are here in Stockholm in physical persons. Magnus Hjort, Director General for Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, Maria Persson Löfgren, Russia Correspondent for Swedish Public Radio, and Sara Övreby, Public Policy and Government Relations Manager at Google Sweden. So please join me here at the stage. And I would like to, without further delay and introductions and weather talk, just jump into the conversation. And I will start with you, Magnus Hjort. You are the Director General for Swedish Psychological Defense Agency. We are now only 2 weeks from the election. Your agency is looking at foreign information manipulation and interference, or if we use the Swedish term, otillbörlig informationspåverkan. What are you seeing so far in Sweden when it comes to foreign manipulations in the information arena in regards to the election?
Well, these are the European elections, so
Yeah.
we like to look at this more broadly than just looking at Sweden, because Europe, the European Union is a whole, but we have separate elections, of course. Russia is trying to influence our societies, our democracies, our elections. And I usually say, or sometimes I say that election interference is like the jewel in the crown when it comes to interfering with other countries. And research has said that Russia and the Soviet Union and also the US has interfered in elections 117 times between 1946 and the year 2000. So this is a common thing that has been done way before we had social media, the internet, and smartphones. What we see is an infrastructure being built up over many years to influence our societies. We see duplicates of media outlets. We see fake social media accounts, botnets, and all other methods that you can possibly think of. A lot of this is done quite openly. We see a lot of influence attempts from high level of government and media outlets in Russia, but also a great deal, of course, is done more covertly. So we see a broad spectrum here.
You mentioned Russia. Any other actors?
Well, today this is, of course, being used by all authoritarian regimes, really. We often speak of China and, of course, Iran as well. I don't think we should rule out that other nations as well is trying to influence election. But the main actor in this election we identify is Russia.
Now I'm turning over to you, Eileen, at the European Commission. If we add to this European-wide perspective, what are you seeing as a communication expert when you look at the EU as a whole?
Well, I think Magnus has covered it very well. I think something that's maybe interesting to look at is the topics that are used. I've heard a researcher on disinformation describe especially Russian disinformation as topic agnostic. That is, it doesn't really matter what the topic is. The point is just to confuse people and make them lack trust in each other. So you can see it on a wide range of areas, specifically to do with elections. We've seen things like procedural, very minor stuff like that. For example, I mean, this is an example from the UK, but we've seen similar things across the EU even in recent years, that if people are voting on paper, where they use pencils, they're told, oh, you're being told to use a pencil so that people can rub it out later and change your vote. Similarly, with voting machines, they can say that these aren't working, or just a more general, there's no point in voting because everything is corrupt, which is very difficult because obviously that could be a legitimate criticism as well. But the wide range of topics can be used.
And Vera Jourova, the Vice President of the Commission, she has on a tour around Europe said that the election will be a test of the Union's resilience against disinformation. Can you elaborate? What does she mean by that?
Well, of course, every election is a big test of our resilience. I mean, I think as Magnus said, they get targeted by many different actors for many different reasons. Something that we should really remember, though, is that it's a test of our resilience, and we're working very hard to put procedures in place. We're coordinating with each other like never before, and it's great to see this new emphasis on disinformation. But also, one of the goals of disinformation is to make us lose trust. And one of the things that we risk by increasing our emphasis on disinformation, which is a good thing in terms of doing more, is that we, in doing so, we almost communicate to people that this election is already lost, that we've already had so much interference that there's no way you can make a good decision. And that's not true. So I think it's really important that we're working on resilience. It is a test of our resilience, but we're preparing so that nothing happens. It's the same as what they say with fighting terrorism. You don't find out how many terrorist attacks are foiled. And likewise, hopefully, lots of disinformation attempts will not actually have an impact on election outcomes. So I think it's really important that we always bear that in mind. We're prepared, but we're not expecting the election to be stolen or anything like that.
Magnus, you mentioned briefly about some of the activities, and in media we have been able to read about two different Russian operations, one called Doppelganger and the other one Matryoshka. Could you and perhaps also Eileen add on, what are they and how are they conducted, and how do they play out in the public?
Well, doppelganger is an old concept that was noticed, I think, 2 years ago, where Russian operatives have been duplicating quite a few large media houses, their websites, trying to draw traffic to these, and here they have planted false articles, trying to influence the readers into accepting the Russian worldview. These are very intricate. They are totally duplicated. So all other links are genuine. They go to the real websites, or for instance, The Guardian or the German newspaper Bild. But the specific article they want to draw traffic to is fake. It has the Russian tendency, trying to portray the Russian worldview of, for instance, German politics, European politics, and the overall objectivity is the ambition is to reduce our trust in our societies, our trust in the European Union, try to delegitimize the European Union, and of course make us believe that it's no use to support Ukraine, because that's an overall ambition for Russia right now, to stop us supporting Ukraine in this war.
And then we have Matryoshka, and then I'm turning to you, Eileen. Could you describe what is the Matryoshka?
To be honest, I don't know an awful lot about the Matryoshka one. I could tell you about the doppelganger, but I think Magnus has covered it very well.
There are quite a few similar operations going on.
Well, I'll add to Matryoshka so we don't keep you confused. It's something that seems to be, for example, that they are trying to make different fact checkers work in a direction, so they are overloaded with questions about things that are fake, openly fake, so they are turning their eyes on a different area. But we have two other panelists also to be let into the discussion. Maria Persson Löfgren, you're a Russia correspondent at Swedish Public Radio. When you look at this with the prism of your area, what are you seeing here in the information arena?
I would say that at the moment they use all types of methods to make people confused, but what's more evident, apart from all the social media and all the new ways of communicating, is that Russia is also doing things like, for instance, sending migrants to Finland or to the Baltics, or just recently there was this incident yesterday about that they wanted to move the borders in the sea. First they said they want to move the borders, then they say they don't want to move the borders, and suddenly we hear from Estonia that the river, which is the border between Russia and Estonia, they have picked up some of the markers there for boats. The boats need to be on the sort of Estonian side, so Estonia has put the markers, and the border guards on the Russian side pick up about 20 to 30 to 40. This is the new way of combining social media and combining information campaigns by doing things sort of hands-on, like the migrants and like saying things about the border and then withdrawing, but then at the same time picking up things that are on the border. So, and as Magnus said, of course, this is nothing new, and for many Russians, all of these ways of trying to confuse are well known since the Soviet time. They just have more tools than they used to have before.
We'll move on a little bit more later into the physical realm of activities, but if we stay in the digital area, Sara Övreby, you are working at Google Sweden. What are you seeing at Google in this aspect in the digital arena?
Yes, I thought I could take the opportunity to look at this from two angles, really. One is that we, across the Google organization, together with our threat analysis group, Mandiant, our trust and safety teams, and others, we constantly assess and look at the threat landscape and what is happening in the digital sphere with regards to disinformation and cyber security threats and other things that can challenge our systems and our societies. And I can just agree with everything that has been said here with regards to the main threat that we see from that point of view towards the European elections or other elections taking place in 2024 is state-sponsored actors trying to influence in various ways. But we have also other actors just taking the opportunity as cyber criminals. We have hacktivists that want to, in a more noble way, maybe influence things. We have insiders, and we have information as a service entity. So there are many different actors that in various ways try to influence what's going on. And I can also, again, just confirm that we see the same thing as previous speakers on the combination of activities that is ongoing and how one operates in terms of both hack and leak attacks or just imposing malware or then also supporting that with publicly facing activities such as commercials or social media activation. And I think that the difference between pure cybersecurity threats and the operations that takes place in this context is the ambition to change public opinion and influence what's going on. And so that is one part of it that we look at it from a systemic point of view in terms of our whole operations. And in this regard, all actors participating in elections are important, not just the election infrastructure, but the campaigns and the politicians and the media and the other authorities, of course. So we see Russia acting in this regard. We see some attempts from Iran as well. We see China and North Korea. And we quarterly publish every activity that we see and that we take action upon in a public domain that we put out there to inform and also help others to assess and analyze the situation. And a lot of that is with regards to YouTube from our end. So this is the caveat into what we see on YouTube. And similarly there, all of these things that are happening in the election context is also not allowed outside of the election context. But it becomes, we have a higher attention at it, and we are, of course, even more deliberate in how we enforce our policies during election years, doubling down on that. But we have 20,000 people around the world working to ensure that our policies are upheld around the clock. And just for Q1 2024, for example, we have taken down close to 16 million channels on YouTube. And that means that a full channel is removed because they break our policies, and then all videos are taken down. The majority of that is because of spam. It's only almost 1% that is taken down because of misinfo. When we look at videos, separate videos taken down, it's 8,300,000 videos that is taken down. Again, a lot is spam and misinfo is 1.5%. So even though it's very important, and Eileen, I think you said that as well, that we need to have our eyes on this problem, but we also don't need to over-exaggerate it. And I will come into later how we practically do to try to help things. But all in all, also that things that we do take down have very few views. Thanks to that, we're working with machines and humans. We can take down most videos before they are even seen. So that is, we have quite good hopes with regards to that technology actually helps us become a bit better at tackling this problem.
Could you give us some examples what you have seen and perhaps taken down that are related to disinformation, misinformation, combined with the upcoming election?
I think that the things that we disclosed so far is a lot on Russia, as said here, trying to influence our view on Ukraine and the US. We have a lot of action also taken with regards to the conflict between Palestine and Israel, where Iran is an actor that is trying to sow discontent and further divide us as people. We have a couple of things going on in Indonesia. That is also an upcoming election, but it's not. It's in more broader terms of how we assess the situation and what we're doing to take down things.
And we're having right now an election in India, the most populous
Yes.
country in the world.
Mm.
But if you look at the numbers, you mentioned some numbers here: 16 million channels, 8.3 million videos, if I got it right.
Mm.
If you look at over time, what development do you see? Is it increasing in number that you have to take down, or what could you say over time here, the tendencies?
I think that we just looking at the last quarter and what actions we had taken. My what do you call it, lekman analysis. My own quick, when looking at the numbers, is that there are, I think it's a combination potentially. It's not, there is an increase of channels and things that we take action on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's increased. So I think I'd rather leave that to the experts here to assess whether there isn't a proper increase or not. But I would say that over time our policies have changed, and over time our technology and the work that humans do have had higher, are increasingly what do you call it, competent. So I would say that overall it is, we're taking down more things.
And now to the audience, now we have talked about different terms here: disinformation, misinformation, FIMI, etc., etc. There are also terms like troll factories, fake news, and so on and so on. Could we help the audience sort them out? What is the difference between disinformation and misinformation, for example? Who wants to take it?
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Disinformation is defined as false messages deliberately spread to cause harm. It's an old word. It's attributed to Russia, but I think it's older than that. I've seen it in the English language from the 1860s. But it was quickly picked up by the Russians in the 1920s, and they formed the Russian word desinformatia. Misinformation is false information that is being spread not with the intent to cause harm. It's intentionally spread because you actually believe in what you think is correct. For instance, you can see the campaign against the social services. I think a lot of what has been spread is misinformation. People actually believe the conspiracy theories that our social services are kidnapping Muslim children and trying to turn them to Christians. FIMI is foreign information manipulation and interference, and that is a broader concept. It includes disinformation, it includes propaganda, which is an old word from the 1600s, developed in the Catholic Church to counter the Reformation. They needed propaganda in the right faith. It's also narratives that are being spread that are not necessarily untrue. They could be like 60% true or 40% false, or they could be value-based in the way that they are not neither true or false. These are values that are being spread in order to influence the way we perceive ourselves or the world. For instance, the LGBT issues are being used that way to give the impression that we are this way, and for instance, Russia is totally anti the way we are. We are considered to be very open to same-sex marriages, same-sex adoptions, and of course that is a value that has not been accepted in some countries. And then you can use this narrative to contrast the way you want to be perceived yourself. And that we see a lot of from Russia, but also from other information environments in the world. Any other?
Oh, well, I had the troll factor, fake news, and if I extend to the other panelists, what kind of words do you prefer to describe this matter when you report about it, Maria Persson Löfgren?
About
what's happening in the information arena when some foreign actor is trying to achieve its will by manipulation in the.
Well, the word troll factory was, I mean, it came from a revelation in St. Petersburg in Russia, and it was actually the well-known, now dead Yevgeny Prigozhin who financed this troll factory. And the interesting thing about the revelation there was that you could get a lot of information on how such a troll factory worked and what type of people worked there. It was young people, very good at computers, and how they managed to influence social media, but also making a lot of disinformation. By usually good disinformation has a part of truth and a part of lies, and that makes it harder to see through. This troll factory, I'm not sure if it still exists in St. Petersburg. It existed for some years there and sort of in secret. But today Russia has so many other ways of communicating their opinion, and their opinion is for many in Europe totally upside down. It's like parallel world. But the problem I see is that because Russia is Russia and it's a Russian language, many have been a bit too late to see through this disinformation, just because we know English, but we don't know Russian enough. So to counter this type of campaigns, you need to have the language, and unfortunately not enough people knows Russian.
So if Russia would have been an English language, we would have understood this much earlier, what was going on in the information arena inside Russia and the consequences for us then.
Yes, and also because among Russians, very few speak English. So they are prone to these campaigns themselves. They sort of become part of the disinformation because they believe in what they are told, because they don't have so many other possibilities to see parallels or to have access to English-speaking media or social media. So it's not only the authorities, but it's also the people themselves. And remember, it's a very big country, and it has 140 million inhabitants. Of course, it's like a big army of trolls.
Yeah. And how many time zones?
Sorry?
How many time zones, just to illustrate it, was it like 10, 13, 12 time zones that Russia is extended, just to understand the largest of the country?
Well, it's the largest in the...
Yeah, I know. I was just trying to put in another figure. I saw that Magnus was signing that you want to have the word.
I would just like to mention that a great deal of this that Russia is doing is aimed to control their own population. This is absolutely necessary to control so that they believe that the worldview that the Kremlin is putting out is reality, that we are the threat, that we are attacking Russia, that Ukraine was a threat to Russia, that NATO was a threat to Russia, that the war is a legitimate cause. Because the Kremlin elite is absolutely terrified of that their population realizes that there is another way. Democracy is a reality out there, and that Ukraine was on the way to develop some kind of democracy without corruption. And if that happens in Russia, that 140 million, 144 million, I think, Russians understand that
It's declining.
It's declining, yeah, that's very interesting. For several years now, the population has been declining. The moment they realize that there is an alternative to what they are living in now, then Putin will have a lot of trouble to deal with. And he does not want to be in that state. So controlling their own population is absolutely a necessity.
When we're talking about words and terminology, Eileen and Sara, do you have any other words that you would like to define here, or do you have any preferred words of your own when you speak about these kind of problems?
Sorry, I think firstly I would say the word fake news we try to avoid now, because it's kind of been weaponized on both sides and it becomes this insult that doesn't really mean anything. For me, the key word is manipulation, because as Magnus explained, misinformation and disinformation, sometimes the boundary between them can be very difficult, right? Because you can have a narrative that's put out there as disinformation and someone genuinely believes it, so it's misinformation when they spread it, which kind of is, it's useful for our policy and it's useful for our law, but it's not very useful for our day-to-day lives. So we do a lot of work in the Commission and the Directorate General for Communication on media literacy. We've recently produced products for teachers and for teenagers. And one of the things we try to do is to focus on think about whether you're being manipulated. You know, don't try and categorize things, because as I'm sure Magnus can tell you, it can be very difficult to attribute something. And in order to classify something definitely as disinformation or as FEMI, you need to be able to attribute it. But to always be aware when you're being manipulated, you know, if something is too good to be true or too bad to be true, then it might be. Take a step away, take your time, make a judgment. I think this can sometimes be as useful for the average person as this kind of really long list of complex definitions.
And would you like to add to this?
No, I think the only thing that we could complement in this regard is echoing the complexity of the landscape, and also in terms of how we act and what content we take action on. That is often with a mix of policies in place to assess manipulation, as Eileen refers to, or if there's a threat to real-world harm, or if there is misleading or civic situations that are important, like elections. And what we try to do also in this context is to raise up authoritative information, because it's one thing that we need to try to remove the existence of misinformation or disinformation, but we also need to help people navigate the information landscape, which is increasingly abundant, which is good because you have a right to information and you have your right to express freedom of expression. But in that regard, we try to help our users navigate the new landscape in various ways.
I would like to move on now into the physical realm that you mentioned here earlier, Maria Persson Löfgren, like the Finnish border is closed because of Russia weaponizing refugees against the Finnish border. That is one example. Right now we are also seeing other examples in Europe. This week Donald Tusk, the premier of Poland, said that it is probably that Russia is behind a big fire at a shopping mall. In Paris, we have seen red hands at a Holocaust monument being painted, and the French intelligence is pointing at two Bulgarians that quickly went to Brussels. And before that, we had that the French intelligence have pointed out that Russia was behind the Stars of David at Paris buildings conducted by Moldovians, paid by a pro-Russian businessman. How should we look at the combination of things that happens in the physical world and how they are then prolonged and getting reached in the digital world? The combination here. Anyone who is up for grab here? Maria, you touched upon the subject, so please be brave and start.
I think also we can mention the failed attempt to kill Prime Minister of Slovakia, Fico. The one who was shooting him, he, according to investigative journalists, had roots in a pro-Slavic organization with ideology which would mean that he should sort of be on Fico's side. So there are many such things that you can mention. You also didn't mention the explosion in the in Czechia, which was proved done by
in 2014,
yes.
Ammunition store, 2 killed.
Yes, and this was actually proved. So of course, this type of events, it's not hard today to. One thing I think we should remember is that there are many people who are ideologically motivated, pro-Russian, who are in Europe, who are in the West. They don't want to live in Russia, but they are very pro-Russian. It's not hard to recruit this type of people to do things. Sometimes you maybe fool them to do something that they didn't expect to do, but in many cases they are motivated, and they are motivated because they believe that Putin is a strong guy. It's good we have another type of world when United States is not the only superpower. You need Russia to be the other superpower or China to be the other superpower, and they also tend to buy this ideological thing that is spread from Kremlin, that the small countries, well, not small, the countries of the third world, they didn't get enough to say. So that's how they spread also to Africa and to Asia, to India. And you meet a lot of these opinions which are very pro-Putin. In Latin America, so many Latin Americans admire Putin. So, of course, they believe in everything that comes from Russia.
Do you like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add that I have no idea of any conspiracy behind the attempt to murder the Slovakian premier. But what we've seen is a very opportunistic acting from the Russian side, trying to use this to blame the EU to be behind this, possibly in coalition with the US or something, always trying to use the situation regardless of having created them or not. They try to seize the moment to seed polarizing dissent in our societies, to actually blame Europe for this attempt to murder a premier. And I'd also like to add that we see the exact same that you are mentioning here, that Russia and other countries, of course China is very active all around the globe, trying to give their worldview leverage all over. And especially this is effective when we have places like that in America, where for good reasons there are many people who are very skeptic against US for their previous interferences. And this is something we see globally, that because of historical events, Russia has opportunities to influence not only Latin America, but you mentioned Africa, I think, and the Middle East. And one other thing that we have seen for quite a number of years now is the global decline of democracy in the world, which I think is a great tragedy, and it's something that we together globally must address. Why is democracy being pushed down? Why is democracy under siege globally on all continents? Why is democracy being reduced? This is something we need to address, I think.
Aileen, would you like to continue?
No, I think the previous speakers have really covered the area pretty well.
But then I stick with you, because this description sounds like it's a global contest on the information arena, perhaps even a global information war about souls and minds. What is the outlook for you when you look at it in this larger context?
I think this is a very, very difficult question, and I'll step away from my commission role in trying to answer it, because I really can't speak. I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission here, but from my experience with the commission. But I think it's a really difficult question, because I think the question of colonialism comes up very often, as previous speakers have mentioned. And that's a difficult one for us in Europe to tackle, right? Because we want to argue for democracy and we want to argue for liberalism and all of these values that mean so much to us. But we're also aware that our countries, or countries like ours, have imposed things on places all over the world in the name of something like liberalism or something like Western values, but which we would no longer subscribe to. So I think, we do need to step forward and be proud of our values, but we need to manage to do that in a way that also respects the different cultures and traditions of the world. And also we need to maybe talk about how we define colonialism, because as Maria mentioned, Russia has become the face of anti-colonialism, whereas, what they did in Ukraine, what they did in many Soviet states, obviously is colonialism, but we've taken a particular definition of it. So I think there's a huge battle to be fought here. And I think that a lot of the heavy lifting on this is going to have to come, I think, probably from beyond the international institutions, but from journalists, from art, even from academics. There's a lot of rethinking we need to do about what our values are and how exactly we can promote them, while also avoiding this imperialism that we have unfortunately been guilty of in the past.
Heavy burden on you here, Maria.
Sorry?
A heavy burden on you. Journalists needs to fix this.
Well, yes. It's always, you always feel that you're a very small part in a big sea, and you have very little possibility to change anything, unfortunately, as a journalist.
If we stay at the global arena, World Economic Forum asks security experts around the world about the risk for the coming 2 years, and on top was disinformation and misinformation. And the report stated, and I quote here now, misinformation and disinformation may radically disrupt electoral processes in several economies over the 2 next years. A growing distrust in information, as well as media and government as sources, will deepen polarized views, a vicious cycle that could trigger civil unrest and possibly confrontation. There is a risk of repression and erosion of rights as authorities seek to crack down on the proliferation of false information, as well as risks arising from inaction. This is a very dark picture of a global menace. Do you share this picture? I'll start with you, Sara.
No.
No?
No. I think that there is obviously a very big threat against our societies and our democracies and the values that we hold high. But at the same time, and I wouldn't say that the burden is only on Maria and the journalists, the burden is on all of us to make sure that we, in our own operations and then in collaboration with others, take the actions needed to try to counteract what is going on. And I think just over the last 5 years, I don't know of how many global initiatives and global collaborations, European collaborations and Swedish collaborations, where we as a company is part of discussing our role as a company and on the platform's role, but also how can we contribute with technology to try to solve this? How can we contribute with research? We are funding the European Media Literacy Institute, for example, a part of starting and co-funding that. And we are also, so we're working on various levels from the single user, trying to help the single user understand what it is that they see when they are online, from helping an organization called Mobile Stories educate young from socially less well-situated areas in Sweden to understand the new media landscape, to then deploying technology in new ways to build databases of toxic content or disinformation classifiers. So there is, I would say, yes, there is a gloomy picture, but I will also say that there's a lot of good things happening that is trying to solve for this.
Gloomy picture, a lot of things happening. Despite all the things are happening, still number one. Magnus, do you share this dark picture?
Well, to some extent, yes, but we need to stay hopeful. We can do something about this. The situation is not hopeless, definitely not. But I think we all have a responsibility, as you said, Sara, very well. We all, companies, government agencies, the media, civil society, political parties, we all have an obligation, I would call it a moral obligation, to always uphold the core values of democracy. Always. Transparency, openness, to safeguard freedom of speech, all the core institutions of our democracies. Free media, independent courts, and so on. We all have an obligation to do this, and we need to start right now, if we haven't started already, to think like this. What can you do to safeguard our democracy? So it's not hopeless, not at all.
No, and just the no also comes from when we have looked at this across our operations, we also see that the attempts to influence has been less successful, and I think anyone else in the panel mentioned that as well. They have normally been less successful than they would have liked. So it's based on a bit of facts as well.
Do you share that this is a global menace and the pessimistic view of the World Economic Forum, or would you like to bring some lights into the discussion, or do you stay in the dark?
Well, I try to be optimistic, of course, but sometimes we are also part of disinformation in media when we don't always see that some of the conflicts we have in world arena are at core about it's sort of a clashing of democratic and autocratic system, and we tend not to. We oversee it too often, I would say, and it's been like this for a long time. It's not something new, but instead of when we report about world issues clearly saying this is an autocratic regime, we sort of tiptoe around it and try, because they themselves have been very good, like Russia also, to have all the elements of sort of a democracy. They have elections, they have courts, although all of these are sort of fake. It's like the Potemkin thing. But
they have TV channels as
it's
well.
very hard to report about, because also in media we are supposed to report both sides, even when the other side is lying. We have to. That's a big problem with the Ukraine war from the start, that you had to give the other side. They say, no, these are not our army. We have to say, no, it's not their army. And then 3 months later, you can prove that it was Russian army inside of Ukraine. So they are very good at using our sort of democratic system also. And it's partly a failure of media that we don't immediately say, no, this is a lie. But we sort of follow this. We have to give their side and the other side.
The media logic and how the media code of conduct is written down, that you should hear both sides in a conflict.
Yeah, and they use it.
Yeah, with some kind of understanding in general, that we tend to believe that none of the sides are blunt liars. but have different interpretations. So perhaps we can have a truth that is somewhere in between.
Or the whataboutism, what very often used.
And whataboutism, that is the classical. If we have a discussion on Russia, someone will raise, well, US then, for example.
Exactly.
But I turn to you, Eileen. The World Economic Forum, risk experts, this pessimistic view on the information arena coming 2 years. Do you share that view or not?
Well, it's a risk report, and these are the risks, but they're not inevitabilities. So somewhere in between, unfortunately, it's not a yes or a no. I think, as Magnus said, it's really, really important that we always maintain this protection of freedom of speech. And as Maria has explained, that's really, really difficult because these actors are very able to exploit our desire to try and give both sides a say and our desire to respect institutions. So it's very, very difficult, but let's always remember these are risks and we need to act against them, especially those of us who are directly working in this area. It doesn't mean that the battle is lost. It's not the case that misinformation and disinformation will radically disrupt. It may radically disrupt. We need to guard against that, but we also need to make sure not to see it as an inevitability, because when we do that, then the actors behind disinformation are winning. That's part of their aim, is to make us give up. So we always need to retain that level of hope.
And here also we have a distinction with actors within a country, within a democratic system, and foreign actors in how to portray this. I'm going to move into a part of the questions here about the Swedish debate that have been talking a lot about political parties' troll factory lately. And I'm not going to give the question to you, Eileen. The Commission tends to stay outside domestic issues. And Magnus, your mandate is foreign, not domestic when it comes to actors. But I turn over to you, Sara, because Google, you have taken action against some of the accounts that are related to this story reported by Commercial Channel 4 and their investigative team. Could you describe what have you done and why?
No, so as I described before, we look at our platforms 24/7 to make sure that they are adhering to local law and our policies. And with regards to YouTube, which this differs to, we have policies that say that you're not allowed to be a spammer, and you're not allowed to mislead. You're not allowed to express that people are inferior because of their race, sexuality, ethnicity, and we have policies against harassment and violence, for example. So when looking at these accounts, we found that they broke our policies, and then we closed them. And as a consequence, all the videos at those channels were taken down as well.
But shouldn't you have seen that before the reporting, that these were accounts that are violating your regulations on the platform?
We are constantly trying to stay ahead of problems that can arise, but we can't always succeed in that regard. And then as soon as we are made aware, we are able to go through content in a more thorough way and take action upon it. I think that we've had a situation before where we've actually we are better situated today to be proactive thanks to the DSA, the Digital Services Act that was adopted by this EU mandate, where the balance has shifted a bit from where we were not allowed to take proactive action to that we now, based on risk and threats that we see, can take action. But even though we work as hard as we can, and we have 20,000 people and machines working on this, we do not always catch things in advance. And that's why I speak to political parties, I speak to campaigners and others and say, if you see something, report it and call me so that we can take action.
Yeah. So that is a good advice. If you see something in the election,
report it, yes.
Report it to the platform owner.
Yes, because we, just on YouTube, for example, there are 500 hours of video uploaded every minute. So that is great because people want to make their voices heard, they're creative, but of course there's also malicious and bad content in there that we need to be aware of.
When you are getting a report like this, or in this case, I mean, the automatic response have not caught it, but then you're looking at it manual and look through the video, physical person, or how is the process done?
No, it's always a combination. So we have machine learning classifiers that we train on certain content, and that looks through what is going on, and I referred to that before, that we are managing to taking down most videos before they're even seen, and that's thanks to machines. But we also, because of freedom of expression and because of the right to information, we also need to make sure that we are not getting into the repressive regimes that the World Economic Forum also warned against. So therefore we have the combination of machines and humans that act upon things. And in the event of I mean, it's as Maria said, this is never it's not always easy. Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's less easy. And then we also consult with experts. We have something called trusted flaggers that help us assess and understand subcultures or environments that we are not ourselves experts within, but then we call upon them also to try to understand what is going on and to then be able to take a good action and with a relevant measure.
Maria, what is your reflection on this troll factor story as a journalist from your perspective?
Well, I'm not surprised that it can happen here too. It's not a surprise, but it's also sort of a warning, I would say, to us that we shouldn't take our democracy for granted, because things like this type of disinformation that we usually say it's like Russia and so on, it can happen here too.
And not now commenting on the specific case, Magnus and Eileen, but I would like to hear your thoughts on about vulnerabilities in general within the EU when it comes to methods that could be described as illegitimate influence, and where the true sender is hidden or being misleading when the receiver gets the information that you don't know who is really behind it. How vulnerable are our society for this in general, Eileen?
I think this is a really difficult question because it comes down to how the internet has evolved over the past 20 years, and particularly social media. And this is not my area of expertise, because obviously we've grown to expect a level of anonymity on the internet, and now we're finding that that's actually quite problematic. At the same time, we want to retain a freedom of speech, and I think this is something that, you know, we're now starting to see regulation in the last few years. The EU is really leading in terms of social media regulation, and hopefully this will improve the situation. But to be honest, I can't give you a clear answer in terms of what exactly needs to be fixed, because I think we need to tread very, very carefully here to make sure that we aren't undermining the freedoms that are so important.
Magnus?
Well, I would say it's the vulnerabilities are different in different countries. For instance, level of education, level of knowledge of how the information landscape works, it's different between different countries. The level of how satisfied you are with how democracy is working, how your government is doing, what we call trust in institutions, trust in media, trust in companies like Google, trust in government agencies, differ between different countries. And I think if you are dissatisfied with how the European Union is working, how the democracy is working, you may be more susceptible to foreign influence attempts to enforce your already the values that you already have, that democracy is not working, there is no use in voting. A lot of countries have a very low turnout when it comes to voting, both in national elections and the European elections. So if you are dissatisfied with that, you may be more vulnerable. Different countries have also other different vulnerabilities, like historical grievances, the experiences of World War II, the Holocaust, of course, the whole Nazi narrative that is being used by Russia against all of us, actually. But it's especially working in Germany for obvious reasons. Border issues between different countries are trying to be used to give the impression that, for instance, Poland wants to have parts of Ukraine back that were lost in the border shifts after World War II. So there are lots of vulnerabilities that a foreign threat actor tries to use in order to influence. Sometimes they pick the right ones, sometimes they lose out. I think all of you have seen the posters outside the Swedish embassy in Moscow trying to portray Astrid Lindgren as a Nazi. Didn't work really. No one believes. And we are not that vulnerable when it comes to that. We know we're not Nazis, most of us, and especially not Astrid Lindgren. But it stuck in our media environment because we were puzzled. What is this? Who is behind this? What do they want? So for a week or so, we discussed it in our media and among ourselves. What do they want? And maybe this was part of their plan to get us going, to get us being puzzled and to polarized. I think we will never know the complete motivation behind these.
And it appeared on one place,
one
if
place
I remember
only.
it correctly,
It was
outside the Swedish embassy.
It was in Russian, so you may
No,
think...
it was another place too.
It was?
It was
okay.
two places, all right.
Well, in the very center of Moscow. So.
Yeah, it was in Russian, but I think they knew that if you post this outside the Swedish embassy, Sweden will notice, and it will be in our media very soon to be discussed.
Now in the first hour we have built a stew on this complex, fascinating and sometimes threatening matter. And now I just would like to add the small issue of AI into this. And you hear my irony in my tone. We see a very quick development on the artificial intelligence, the quality of deep fakes, deep audio, deep fake videos and so on is getting better and better, and you can use AI to produce text accounts and so on and so on. How do you see this AI puzzle add to this stew? Anyone up for grab? Eileen?
I can start, but I'm sure others will have more to say. I think one of the things that AI enables, which Sara kind of alluded to a bit earlier, is that there's a lot of attempts to manipulate people in this way, particularly online, don't have that huge an impact. But there are so many of them that it becomes quite difficult to respond to them, to keep track of them. You know, it becomes very overwhelming. It's kind of death by 1,000 cuts, as they say. And AI enables this through all of the methods that you've mentioned. I think something that we might be underestimating at the moment is text-based AI, just the number of absolute trash news sites that are out there now and that can be used on social media that can just be... There's no way we can keep up with them. And if we try to respond to each of them, then we end up wasting an awful lot of time. As you mentioned earlier with the Matryoshka case, it's really difficult to keep on top of. At the moment, I think photo and video AI can be at least relatively easily detected. I mean, I've seen a lot of very convincing ones. Audio, I think, is actually more difficult. It can be quite good. And, you know, there's a lot of work going on. AI also offers a lot of opportunities for us, of course, because we can use AI to catch AI and to manage this huge wealth of information. But yeah, it's a complete paradigm changer, and it's something that we're going to have to work very hard over the next few years to keep up with. I think, again, it's important to retain a level of perspective on it. Some of the things that we need to do to combat AI as ordinary users of the internet or ordinary consumers of information are the same things we always need to do. You know, check the source, check the date, check the content. Think about if something is very emotionally triggering, then maybe it's been designed in order to have that effect. So we always have to remember that the old tools we have still work, but there is a huge gap here, and we have the AI Act coming in later this year, unfortunately not in time for the election, but in terms of trying to regulate the applications of AI, there's a lot of work that's going to be happening in the next couple of years on a regulatory level, but I think on a user level, really what we can all do is the same things we're continually doing in terms of just being careful of information.
I'm going very soon to quote you on AI, Sara, but before I move over to you, anything more about the problems or the challenges that we see with AI, Maria and Magnus?
Well, the technological development is so extremely fast that it's getting better as we speak, by the minute, literally. And it's already being used in a few elections to influence the voters, and it's going to get much better. As Eileen said, fake voice messages is done quite good, actually. We've seen videos that are credible when you look at the person who is speaking, the lip movement. The trick here is to get the message credible, because what we've seen earlier, like the fake videos of President Zelensky telling Ukrainians to give up, the message was completely out of line with what everyone knew Zelensky was saying at the time. So it was not credible. And it was poorly made. It was made with the technology of that time, but it's getting so much better. And we need to try to keep up with the development, and that's a tricky part.
In the Indian election right now, we are seeing dead Bollywood stars appearing back again, promoting candidates. Is that something that you think you will see in the European elections if we have not seen it yet? For example, perhaps Tage Erlander might appear again and from the other side and promote a candidate?
As I said before, I think it's crucial that we all try to uphold the core democratic values of transparency and openness and stick to that. And using dead prime ministers well, could be fun to watch, but nevertheless, in this particular case, everyone would know that it was being made by AI, but it could be other things. I'd be more worried about.
Can you elaborate on that? Because that sounded a bit exciting.
No, but if you use people who are alive, then you at least know they are alive, and they are giving messages. But as I said, the point where they have failed so far as I can tell, is making the message credible, the context credible. No one believes President Zelensky when he is used in a fake video saying that we should give up.
For example, if you take President Biden of the US and make him appear more unstable when he walks or talk more slowly and so on.
Those things is already out there.
Would you like to add something, Maria?
No, it's just that Russia gets another tool in their toolbox, and already Vladimir Putin is using stand-ins, and I guess he will also have some AI-generated stand-in when he don't want to appear himself, or maybe he dies and we will see AI Putin, who knows.
And I want now try to move into the area of fixing it, and we stay with the AI for a short while. And now comes the quotes here from you, Sara. You have said that we must be brave and use the opportunity that arises from AI, and on the same time have a responsible and thought-through strategy to the technology to deal with challenges such as deepfake and AI. And now comes the 10,000 euro question. How do we do it?
Yes, we keep working hard. No, I think that from our perspective, as I've alluded to before, we see AI as a technology that can help us enforce our policies and help us take down content that should not be there. And as many other panelists here have said, the challenges is not just, AI is just a new tool. The way of operating or the things that you try to achieve are the same, but we now have a new technology that can enable us to do more and do it with more credibility. But so how do we handle that? How do we take that responsibility with the challenges of the technology? And Google don't only have social media like YouTube, I mean, a platform for where people can express their views, but we do also produce generative AI tools. And within that remit, we are very deliberate in our approach, not stressing launches and not just trying to get out there with products, but really thinking through what the effects and what the challenges with this technology can be. So, for example, if you generate an image with a Google generative AI tool, that image is watermarked, and a watermark is a labeling that is not visible for the eye, but that you can know that an image is created through generative AI. If you use Gemini, our version of ChatGPT, you could always double check the answers. So within Gemini, we help you have this easy interaction and find information, but we can also use the power of search in helping you source check what Gemini is saying, because no chatbot is perfect. And we also work with the broader context of images, and this comes from before AI, and that is that you can look at an image and see where did it first appear on search, because displacing images and trying to say that they show different things is an old problem. And then you can see where an image first appeared, and you can cross-check that in an easy way. And also on Gemini, we have you cannot ask questions related to elections or questions related to politicians, because we want to make sure that Gemini is not used to spread information. And this work is done on company level. It's done on international level with, for example, the Tech Accord for AI and elections that was signed at the Munich Security Conference. It's done within the EU's work on misinformation. So there's a lot of going on. And then we have the people using our platform. So when an advertiser uses our platform, we ask them to be transparent about using AI or synthesized media in their advertisement. And this is, again, for the user to be made aware of what they are seeing and what are they experiencing, and being able to assess what's going on. And the same goes then for YouTube, that creators that have synthetic media representing real situations or real people, that it's also going to be labeled as such. And if it breaks the policies, of course, then it's taken down as usual. So that are a couple of things that we're trying to do to support transparency, really, in this area. And I think that we often come back to this. In addition to enforcing our policies, the other tool we often use is educating and informing our users in various ways.
That is one aspect of how do we fix the problem and how do we protect elections. Elections could be described in three phases. You have the election time before the election, when the candidates are trying to seek your support. You have the election day and the vote counting. And then you have the aftermath of the election up till you have a peaceful transfer of power to a new European Commission, for example, or forming a new government. 3 different phases. What more measures, or what measures would you like to see applied here in order to have future elections safeguarded? Are today's legislation and methods enough? Do we need to do more, and what in that case? A small question to deal with. Easy fix.
Yeah.
I think you have correctly identified the 3 phases, and I think as we move closer to the election day, the theory is, anyway, that the attempts to influence will increase, because many voters decide on the last day or the day before that. I think France has a legal system where it's not allowed to make propaganda the last 2 days, which was useful for them in the election of 2017, when there was great hack and leak attack on the Macron campaign. I'm not saying that this is something we should introduce in Sweden and just mention it, that this apparently worked in France. And as you said, we have the period after the election where we may be subjected to attempts to say that the election was not fair, it was stolen, like we've seen in America. We may see attempts to hinder the process to form a government, because that's not an easy task these days. And the period when a country is sort of between governments is an increased vulnerability, of course, on many levels. So I think we need to be aware of these different phases, and that we need to be aware of that things may happen, things that could be used opportunistically. We have had the Quran burnings, which have been used opportunistically. We had the murder attempt of the Slovakian premier. Other things could appear in our society that will be used in some way to influence the elections or the forming of a government. I'll stop there.
What do we need to do to fix the robustness of elections?
I think I will not answer that question. It's too big.
It's too big. But I make it smaller. There are a lot of threats against journalists reporting political issues. What could EU do more in order to protect people like journalists or for example, election officials in the US? They have been targeted, for example. Do you see anything that is needed to be done there?
Well, of course there is always threats, but I think today most media organizations, they have already a big part of a security department which is dealing with these type of threats, whether it's in connection with elections or other things, and that's a huge difference in media, that we need to have this type of security organizations, whether it's threats online or physical threats, or there is much more of threats to journalists today, and I don't see that EU can do much more than it's already being done by the security. But of course, if we talk about Sweden, it's one thing, but if we talk about Russia, we decided not to go to Russia because of the security situation. Because you cannot be sure if you go there that you will come back, and if somebody put you in jail, Swedish authorities or Swedish radio can do nothing. So it's a big gamble to go to these countries. That's something a bit new.
And Brussels, looking at you, Eileen, here, do you have any good things that need to be done in the future? Or does the Commission have it in the pipeline?
I think this is a very... so are we talking the more general election question or the more specific?
The more general election question.
I think, yeah, this is really, really complicated because, as Magnus alluded to, it's different in every member state. Pre-election moratoria are an interesting topic because sometimes they apply only to traditional media, and that can cause an issue. If you're allowed to if you're allowed to say what you want on social media, but it can't be discussed in a newspaper, then journalists can't do their jobs, arguably. But yeah, I think unfortunately this is a member state question, and I can't say too much about what can be fixed, certainly from an EU perspective.
And Sara, now you're going to get the most peculiar question you ever have gotten. What kind of regulations would you wish to have more about in order to fix this? Since you're in the industry, your tendency is that you don't like regulations from lawmakers. But are there anything that you think that they should do?
I think that the work within the DSA has helped a lot with regards to our ability to be proactive and also increasing the transparency around the functioning of the platforms. I don't think I as this is rather new, and we also have complementary in the AI Act, I think we would like to see the implementation. I mean, the implementation phase of these regulations becomes really, really important in getting it right and effective. But what we would like to see, and a problem with the DSA, is that some requirements only allude to very big platforms, and then we see that problems move along the value chain to smaller platforms or different types of platforms. So I think that is one area where we need to keep our eyes or see what's happening with the information landscape in that regard going forward. But otherwise, I would say that I would like to see a bit more practical. What we can do up until the next election is maybe a bit of more practical activities. We have excellent cooperation with the Psychological Defense Agency and with other media in Sweden, for example. But as far as I know, a more cross-functional or cross-sector discussion of the threat landscape is not something that we are part of, where I think we could contribute more with our views and expertise. And the best defense is educated and aware population. If the population is aware of what's going on, that's our best defense. And we do things already, but we can probably do more. And I know that, again, the Psychological Defense Agency is doing a lot in that area. But I think there we all have, let's keep at it and working together and making people aware of what's going on.
Can I take the opportunity to try to raise awareness of one particular method, which I've been mentioning a few times here, hack and leak, which was used in the US elections of 2016 and the French elections of 2017. And recently, in December last year, the UK Cybersecurity Agency published an attribution of quite a few hack and leak activities that had been going on for a few years in the UK. And they attributed to, with almost certainty, to a Russian threat actor, a Russian hacking group connected to Russian intelligence services. And this is a very common way to try to influence our societies, to do these things and to mask them as being done by hacktivists or likewise, and then spreading them. And I would say that it's, when you come across leaked material like this, it's almost impossible to be sure that the information you are receiving or are retrieving from the internet from some site is a genuine article, because it's very easy to mix real documents with fake documents. It's been done before, and we have instances going way beyond our digital world. We have a Operation Neptune, you can Google it, from the 1960s. Very interesting KGB operation where they suddenly found Nazi documents in a coffin in a lake. And these Nazi documents had been planted there, genuine Nazi documents taken by the Russian side when Germany lost the war, but also included fake documents in order to discredit opposition in Czechoslovakia, but also to discredit Germany. And this could happen today as well. So I think we all need to be aware when we are seeing leaked material that we can't really be sure what it is. What is the context? Is this draft documents or finalized ones? Have they been planted by a foreign intelligence service? So I would really like to raise the awareness of this particular method.
You can go back to old KGB operations and see that they appear in a new shape in modern time. We have a short time for some questions, and I think we have time for 3 questions, and we take them in a row and let you answer them quickly. And the man in the back, the second man in the back, and who is the lucky third? We don't have a lucky third. We take 2 questions then. Oh, well. We take 2 questions and see what time we have. Please go ahead there.
Yeah. Thank you, Lubochano, Slovak ambassador. Obviously, I have to comment because there have been a lot of said about the assassination attempt of my prime minister. I just want to clear that there is no conspiracy and there is no link of the shooter with any pro-Russian or pro-Slavic organization. It was said very clearly at the very beginning, clarified by the police. But still, this fake news has some life and is working, unfortunately, also in the Sweden media environment. But nevertheless, it's very true. There are a lot of disinformation in Slovakia, particularly through social media. The social media influence of society, I mean, double, tripled through in pandemic times. That's very true. And then it continues now. My question after this comment is that, particularly to Sara, government doubled or even tripled some of the capabilities to cope with the disinformation, fact checkers, etc. We do not see the same response from either Google or from Meta. Actually, we have a lot of fact checkers, civic organizations, etc. But the average time of response by Google or Meta have been weeks. When we identified and attributed this is a really, I mean, a disinformation, either a YouTube channel or account, etc. So, explanation was we do not have enough Slovak native fact checkers, etc. So we asked why. Because of the business model of the social media platform. Small market, small number of the fact checkers for the Slovak dedicated people. So I wonder, and I very much agree with you, Sara, saying that the best defense is education. We do a lot of education. But nevertheless, so how do you want to address this issue that small markets like Slovakia, small amount of fact checkers, but disinformation and influence of society is huge. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your comment and question. And then the second gentleman there.
Is this on? Oh, perfect. My name is Linus from the Swedish Defense University. I have a question particularly for Magnus, I think. In the academic literature on malign information influence and antagonistic influence operations, there is often an explicit link between these operations and national security. However, national security is seldom, if ever, specified. So my question is, what particular aspects of national security would you think, if any, are at risk or harmed or whatever, maybe in the Swedish context or in the European context? Thank you.
Yes, Sara, start with you and the question from Slovakia and the ambassador.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm very sorry, but I won't be able to answer in detail as I work mainly in Sweden. But I would say, on a general note, that in conjunction with the pandemic and over time, we have raised. When I started working at Google, we had 10,000 people checking material. Now we have 20,000, and we have better machine learning and better technical tools to assist us. That is not to make your problem less important, but hopefully over time, this can also help in smaller languages and in smaller markets where we can more easily, with the help of machines, assess material. I know that we historically has been less good in smaller languages, so your experience is very valid in that regard. But I would also say that we are continuously working to try to fix that in various ways. And so I hope that can suffice, and I can, of course, connect you with my colleagues if we should discuss this further.
And then you had a question in relationship to national security.
Yes.
And the election and disinformation from foreign actors in regards to election in Sweden and to the European Parliament in all the European countries.
Yes, I would say that when it comes to national security, it's our democracy at stake here. When it comes to Sweden and the European elections. When it comes to Ukraine, it's their existence as a nation, as a culture, as a people, as a culture. So the stakes are much higher there, but the stakes are high enough when our democracies are being challenged. And as I mentioned, we all need to uphold our democracies. We all need to do what we can. And the ambassador mentioned conspiracy theories. I think there are quite a few conspiracy theories going around, actually. And we need to be wary of this because we all have some kind of confirmation bias. We are more likely to believe things that we are, things that we are already believing when we see them. So we all need to be aware of that. But democracy is at stake here. And as I said before, democracy is at siege globally. And we all need to address this.
and stay perhaps a bit cool.
Yeah.
And I think time is running up. Someone is looking at the clock very, very anxious. Thank you. You have been a great panel, and also to you in the audience. And don't forget to vote. The election starts in 2 weeks in the European Union, and Sweden election date in June of 9. Thank you very much, and give them an applaud and a small present. Oh. Tack så mycket. Tackar.